How robo-taxis are trying to win passengers' trust. Autonomous vehicles are already clocking up millions of miles on public roads, but they face an uphill battle to convince people to climb in to enjoy the ride. A few weeks ago, I took a tour of San Francisco in one of Waymo's self-driving cars. As we drove around the city, one thing that struck me was how comfortable people had become with not seeing a driver. Not only were there multiple driverless vehicles on any given street at any given time, but tourists no longer had their mouths agape as one drove by. The technology has become a familiar sight. Inside the vehicle itself, there were signs of how Waymo is trying to inspire a similar feeling among their passengers. The all-electric car offers a warm welcome to passengers by name and plays music as they climb inside. A screen positioned in front of the rear seats offers those along for the ride the option of seeing a follow-along map of the route, as well as settings for temperature and music. Another screen beside the steering wheel shows images of what's around the vehicle. As we drive, I can see people sitting inside buses alongside us, dogs crossing the street ahead, and children skipping along the sidewalk. Waymo wants you to see what the vehicle can. It wants you to trust it. It is part of a wider trend within the autonomous ride-hailing industry. The technology allowing these self-driving vehicles to weave their way through busy city traffic is being used out there in a handful of cities around the world. What Waymo and its competitors need to do is to convince passengers to climb inside them. Yet, research seems to suggest that the public in the US and the UK are reticent about riding in self-driving vehicles, with safety being among the most common concerns. A lot of it comes down to the trust people are willing to place in the technology and the companies that build the vehicles. But also there seems to be a higher bar when it comes to attitudes on the safety of autonomous vehicles compared to conventional cars. For Waymo, the solution is to instill confidence in the robotic systems driving the vehicle. There is something very important about being able to know where the car is going, that the car sees what you're seeing, says Megan Neese, Waymo's head of product and customer research, from beside me during our tour of San Francisco. The company plans to keep the seats forward-facing with a steering wheel in its next-generation car, she says. It's a familiar setup in traditional taxis, and that ability to see where the car is going helps people trust the car. She says Waymo, which is owned by Google's parent company Alphabet, began offering robotaxi services in the U.S. without a safety driver on board in 2020. It now provides 150,000 paid rides a week across San Francisco and Los Angeles in California and Phoenix in Arizona. In the grand scheme of ride-sharing, it is still small scale. Uber claims to facilitate around 200 million trips every week worldwide, but the market is growing. It is also highly competitive. Ensuring passengers are at ease and comfortable is likely to be where much of the battle will be fought. Amazon-backed Zoox, which plans to enter the market in 2025, is taking a different approach to gaining consumer trust. It aims to let passengers lose themselves in the ride by not seeing what's ahead or what the autonomous driver can see. Weeks after my Waymo ride-along, Zoox invited me to try their test vehicle at their Foster City headquarters outside of San Francisco on a prescribed course between two office buildings. Needless to say, it was a very different experience than riding Waymo in the wild, across a densely urban environment. Zoox's offering is a purpose-built vehicle that is bidirectional, with no forward-facing or rear-facing windows. There is also no steering wheel, no pedals, and no display screens to show the vehicle's surroundings. Instead, 4 seats face each other, bay seating style. On either side, there are sliding doors featuring large windows. A small screen next to each passenger allows them to personalize temperature controls and select music, while a wireless charging pad sits on a flat divider between the seats. The vegan leather seats are dark green, and the ceiling has twinkling lights set into it. It felt like a Disneyland ride. To help gain consumer trust, Zoox has also begun publicly revealing details of its Fusion Center, where human operators can provide guidance to vehicle remotely to get it out of an unfamiliar situation, which the company describes as a little like laying a path of digital breadcrumbs for it to follow. During testing, the company says its vehicles received remote guidance for 1% of the total driving time. Waymo previously did not talk publicly about its teleoperations center, but earlier this year revealed it too has humans on hand to dial in to provide assistance. But rather than using remote drivers, Waymo's fleet response team answers questions from the autonomous vehicle about the choices it should make in ambiguous situations. By comparison, General Motors-owned Cruise lost its permit to operate in California and had to pause operations after one of its vehicles dragged a pedestrian for 20 feet, 6 meters, after they were thrown into its path in October 2023. Since the incident, the company has been keen to highlight the layers of human support it uses with its vehicles. These include a team of fleet monitors, remote assistants, and on-the-ground personnel to provide in-person assistance. Cruise says that prior to its operational pause last year, its vehicles connected to the remote assistance teams 3% of the time they were driving autonomously in urban environments. But that intervention wasn't necessary on all those occasions. The company says remote assistance provided on-road support for 0.6% of total autonomous driving time. Cruise's chief executive and co-founders resigned a few months after the accident, while 900 other employees were laid off. The company has since resumed testing with safety drivers behind the wheel in Phoenix, Arizona, and Dallas, Texas. It has also struck a multi-year deal to bring its cars onto the Uber platform. While self-driving taxis are being tested in many parts of the world, their deployment is most advanced in the US and China. Dozens of cities have approved trials of robotaxis on public roads in the US. Waymo currently has the largest fleet in the U.S. with more than 700 cars in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. It's the only paid robotaxi service in the U.S. and is expected to start offering a service in Austin and Atlanta during 2025 in partnership with Uber. Zoox eventually plans to offer rides in San Francisco after months of testing on roads for its employees. Zoox is also testing in Las Vegas, Seattle, Austin, and Miami. Cruise has yet to announce when it may open up its service to the public and is currently continuing testing in Phoenix, Houston, and Dallas. Other autonomous services in development include Toyota-backed May Mobility, which has city-funded deployments across Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, and Texas. Meanwhile, Chinese robotaxi giants AutoX and WeRide have permits to operate in California. China leads the world in terms of the number of autonomous vehicles being tested on the road. The authorities there say they have issued around 16,000 licenses for self-driving cars and buses in more than 20 cities. In Beijing, 33 companies have been given the green light to conduct trials within a vast 1,160 square mile, 3,000 square kilometers area, according to officials. China's largest robotaxi operator is AutoX, backed by Chinese technology giant Alibaba, with a fleet of autonomous vehicles in Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Shanghai. Baidu's Apollo Go, which operates fully driverless ride-hailing services in the cities of Beijing, Shenzhen, Wuhan, and Chongqing, with a fleet of 400 vehicles, has been trying to win its customers over with low prices, sparking some complaints from local taxi drivers. Earlier this year, one of the company's driverless taxis collided with a pedestrian when they stepped into the road at some traffic lights. Although the person was not injured, it sparked questions about the technology's ability to deal with unexpected situations. A spokesperson for Apollo Go insisted that safety of all road users was a top priority for the company and that its vehicles have accumulated more than 62 million miles, 100 million kilometers, of autonomous driving in real-world situations without major accidents. Apollo Go has faced other public perception problems, with mishaps involving its vehicles spreading quickly on social media in China. In one incident, a robotaxi caused a traffic jam after stopping for a plastic bag in the road, while on another occasion, two autonomous vehicles became stuck in a polite standoff where they both tried to give way to the other. The software that the cars run on, however, now has a plastic bag misdetection feature built into it, and Apollo Go says its sixth-generation robotaxis launched this year carry enhanced software and hardware. Much like Waymo's robotaxis in the U.S., the Apollo Go vehicles feature a screen that shows a view of what the car's cameras can see, or a map-like view with other road users detected by the car's sensors marked on it. Highway passengers in only a handful of cities in China and the US are now able to hail robo-taxis. Testing of autonomous vehicles is taking place in many other parts of the world. Japan is getting ready for its first robotaxi deployment in Tokyo, with Tier 4 due to launch its service this month. May Mobility, which has been offering rides in a handful of locations around the US, also launched in Nagoya, Japan, in early November. But they still require a safety driver in the front seat. They appear to be targeting older people as the main market for an autonomous ride-hailing service. Roughly 1/3 of Japan's population is aged 65 and older, says a spokesperson for May Mobility. This has led to more retirees and more people needing transportation assistance, yet many transportation operators face hiring challenges. AVs can help the elderly and others have a reliable and safe option to get around town. Pilots of autonomous vehicles have also started in Singapore, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. With the Autonomous Vehicles Act passing in the UK, robotaxis are expected to hit British roads by 2026. Croatian startup Vern has partnered with Intel's Mobileye on a car with no steering wheel and seating for two, which is expected to roll out to 11 cities across the EU, UK, and Middle East, including Manchester, England. One key feature it says it will introduce to its vehicle is a physical switch that customers can use to start and stop the ride. It is an attempt to give passengers a sense of control over the vehicle, the company says. While it is clear that some people are willing to jump in a self-driving taxi as readily as a normal rideshare, winning over those who still have doubts will be essential for the gambles being taken on autonomous vehicles to pay off. As the regulatory environment catches up with the technology in many parts of the world, convincing passengers in sufficient numbers to create the scale needed to turn a profit is still a challenge. GM recently reported a £435 million loss on Cruise this quarter, despite having paused operations for the past year. Motional, a robo-taxi firm partially backed by Hyundai Motor Group, reached 100,000 rides via the Uber and Lyft platforms in Las Vegas before the project was halted in May 2024 with sweeping layoffs. Carly Agnema, Motional's chief executive, acknowledged the challenges facing the industry. Large-scale driverless deployment will not happen overnight, he says. While we're excited by our pace of technical progress and our initial commercial deployments have yielded valuable insights, large-scale deployment of AVs remains a goal for the future, not the present. Waymo is also short of its stated goal of serving 1 million trips per day with 20,000 cars. But new actors are still entering the robotaxi market, with Elon Musk's Tesla announcing its long-awaited Cybercab robotaxi. The vehicle will not have a steering wheel or pedals and is not expected to go into production until 2026. Prior to the announcement, however, Musk also announced that he intends to give Tesla owners the opportunity to rent out their own vehicles as autonomous taxis as early as late 2025, with testing already underway in the San Francisco area. For Tesla employees in the Bay Area, we already are offering ride-hailing capabilities, Musk said. With the development app, you can request a ride, and it will take you anywhere in the Bay Area. We do have a safety driver for now. Regulatory approval for such a scheme, however, is far from guaranteed. As of November 2024, Tesla only holds a permit to test autonomous vehicles with a safety driver behind the wheel in California. Musk, who now holds a position within President-elect Donald Trump's administration, has said he is going to push for updated autonomous vehicle legislation. Mary Barra, chief executive at GM, recently spoke of her own frustrations with the regulatory approvals system at the TechCrunch Disrupt conference. Federal road safety regulations, for example, require a steering wheel and airbags in cars. I personally had been working with policymakers to get legislative change because you have to change federal motor vehicle safety standard laws, Barra said, and I've probably been working on it for 6-7 years now. But the biggest battleground in the robo-taxi race may be winning public trust. With many different approaches on offer, it may be some time before the less adventurous paying passengers feel happy enough to sit back and enjoy the ride.
British Museum given its most valuable gift ever. The British Museum is to receive what is believed to be the highest value gift ever received by a UK museum with the acquisition of £1 billion worth of Chinese ceramics. Trustees of the Sir Percival David Foundation, which owns the works, are to donate 1,700 pieces following a 15-year loan to the London Museum. The charitable foundation represents the late British businessman, who collected the items in Europe, Japan, Hong Kong and China, before his death in 1964. The director of the British Museum, Dr. Nicholas Cullinan, said it was an incomparable private collection. The works have been on loan to the museum since 2009 and on show in the specially designed bilingual Room 95. Sir Percival David was born into a wealthy family in Bombay in 1892 and inherited a baronetcy from his father, as well as ownership of the family company. The businessman moved to London in 1914, from where he began to collect large amounts of Chinese art and books. Trustees of the Sir Percival David Foundation said he had wanted his private collection to be used to inform and inspire people. Dr. Cullinan said he was humbled by the generosity of the trustees of the Sir Percival David Foundation. He added, "These celebrated objects add a special dimension to our own collection and together offer scholars, researchers and visitors around the world the incredible opportunity to study and enjoy the very best examples of Chinese craftsmanship anywhere in existence." The donation will take the number of Chinese ceramics held by the British Museum to 10,000 pieces, making it one of the most important collections of such items of any public institution outside the Chinese-speaking world. Highlights from the Foundation's donation include the David vases from 1351, which revolutionized the dating for blue and white ceramics with their discovery. The collection also includes a chicken cup used to serve wine for the Chenghua Emperor and Ru wares made for the Northern Song Dynasty court around 1086. The chairman of the Sir Percival David Foundation of Chinese Art, Colin Sheaf, said the donation achieved Sir Percival's three main objectives. He said these were to preserve intact his unique collection, to keep every single piece on public display together, and to ensure the collection would remain an inspiration and education for future generations. Arts Minister Sir Chris Bryant added, "I am thrilled these world-famous Chinese ceramics will now be displayed permanently in the British Museum, where the collection will educate and enlighten future generations for many years to come. I am immensely grateful for this phenomenal act of generosity and very much hope it will help set a trend for others." After the donation is completed, pieces will be lent to the Shanghai Museum in China and Metropolitan Museum in New York as part of the British Museum's support of exhibitions worldwide. The final transfer of ownership to the British Museum will be subject to the Charity Commission's consent.
How to prepare an indigenous holiday meal. Ben Jacobs, one of the U.S.'s premier native chefs, explains how to make a celebratory feast that tells a story of people and place. Ben Jacobs is on a mission. The Denver, Colorado-based chef and entrepreneur wants to make native foods more accessible to the public and educate people about indigenous culinary traditions across the United States. To do this, he's opened the Native American restaurant K.L.P, a meal delivery service called Harvest Meals featuring native recipes, and the e-commerce site Tokabi Indigenous Marketplace, which connects Native American food suppliers with customers around the country. As a result, Jacobs is a driving force in a nationwide movement to reclaim native cuisine. 16 years after Tokabe's opening, he's opening an additional location in Denver's airport in 2025, and the thriving marketplace donates thousands of meals to communities in need each month. In 2023, Jacobs was also appointed to President Biden's Council on Sports, Food, and Nutrition, which helps him further amplify native foods, culture, and community by spearheading programs like the recent One Lacrosse Gathering on the National Mall. With over 570 federally recognized native tribes and more that are not federally recognized by the U.S. government, there is a massive population of people we are fortunate to represent and help to share the story of their food, Jacobs tells the BBC. My origins are in the Osage Nation, but we are all working against a food system that was methodically deconstructed by the U.S. government for centuries. There's still a long road ahead, and it's not just Tokub's story, it's all of ours. As many families gather this season to celebrate the holidays, We asked Jacobs how he might prepare a feast in his own home that reflects his heritage. When I think about creating a celebratory feast, Jacobs says, I go beyond Osage-specific ingredients and traditions because I want people to see that all different Native elements are a part of it. For Osage Nation members and many other Native American tribes, holiday and celebratory meals are communal affairs, served family style, with everything laid out in the center of a long table in large bowls. Jacob's holiday meal is full of layered flavors: richness from meats, citrus from sumac, tartness from berries, sweetness from honey and maple syrup, freshness from vegetables, and the approach can be modified depending on whether you're in a home kitchen or have access to a smoker or open fire. Bison was a staple food in Native American communities for centuries before their systemic eradication. Jacobs explains that the animal's meat was a valuable resource for many communities, including Osage, and supported year-round sustenance. We select this cut, a petite tender located near the shoulder, due to the tenderness of the meat. Because bison is so lean, you have to be thoughtful with how it is prepared. The tender is exactly that, tender, while remaining juicy and incredibly flavorful. Berries pair really well with bison and wild game meats, and we enjoy the balance, he says. To prepare the meat, Jacobs recommends rubbing dried sage, salt, and pepper into the steak and searing it on each side until it's medium rare. For the glaze, you can use whatever berry is accessible to you, but I like huckleberries. Slowly render the berries down with a touch of honey. You don't want it overly sweetened. You're just balancing the tartness of the berries with the honey. Serve the bison steak sliced with the glaze poured over top, he says. Our duck breast recipe was inspired by a former principal chief of the Osage Nation, Sylvester Tinker. In 1956, when my mother was 10 years old, he and his wife gave her a cookbook they'd created that covered many methods of Osage cooking. Consistent with our approach, we added our expression to it with citrus notes of the sumac glaze, balancing the rich fattiness of the duck, he says. Jacobs prefers to age the duck breast by air drying it in a cooler for a minimum of 5 days. He then sears it in a cast iron pan, skin side down. For the sumac and honey, I make a tea with indigenous herbs like elderflower, nettle, cherry bark, sunflower, and rose hip. Reduce the tea down and add wildflower honey to infuse a deeper floral flavor along with the sumac. Slice and plate the duck breast and lightly glaze with the infused honey. Smoked butternut squash soup. I like to use honey nut squash, but you can use Hubbard, butternut, or acorn squash too, Jacobs says. For ease, put them in the oven to soften. I'd also soften them first in an oven, but then put them on an open fire with blackjack wood, which you can find on Osage land, to add smoky flavor notes. When the squash is cooked, remove the skin and blend it into a thin puree with a vegetable or chicken stock. We use a corn stalk to infuse the corn aroma into the smoky creaminess of the squash. Top it off with toasted pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds and a drizzle of pumpkin seed oil. Tepary bean green chili salad with charred cactus paddle, nopals. As Jacobs explains, the tepary bean doesn't have history in Osage cooking, but it's more a part of how we cook now with K.L.P. Some of my favorite ingredients are in this dish and come from Colorado and the Southwest, like the chilies and beans and cactus paddles. Jacobs loves this dish because of how its unique ingredients pair nicely with one another. Here's how he recommends preparing it. Roast or open fire. Char your green and poblano chilies and cactus paddle. Remove the skin from the chilies and dice it all up, along with yellow bell pepper, slightly larger than the tepary bean. Make a light vinaigrette with mostly olive oil and a little bit of acid in there. Apple cider vinegar is great, and toss it all together. It depends on the time of year, but add a wild onion or scallion to open everything up. Fry bread. Fry bread, a flour-based dough that's flash-fried or deep-fried in oil or lard until it's browned or fluffy, is one of the most recognizable native foods in the U.S., but as Jacobs explained, it's got a conflicting past and even present. It's a food that came out of the reservation relocation era, beginning with the Indian Removal Act of 1830 through the Indian Relocation Act of 1956. It was created from government commodities that were provided to forcefully relocated communities, Jacobs says. We as Native peoples are not all the same. We are tribally, culturally, regionally different. But fry bread is the one recipe that is most closely related across communities. Everyone has a variation on the recipe, but it does tie us together, so I always embrace it.
Week 11 of the NFL season kicked off Thursday with quarterback Jalen Hurts leading the Philadelphia Eagles past the Washington Commanders and ended with Joe Mixon rushing for 3 touchdowns to lead the Houston Texans against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday. Around the NFL on Sunday, the Pittsburgh Steelers earned a statement win over the Baltimore Ravens. The Detroit Lions overpowered the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Miami Dolphins and New Orleans Saints look like they are headed in the right direction after posting their second consecutive wins. Later, the Denver Broncos demolished the Atlanta Falcons. Quarterback Geno Smith helped lead the Seattle Seahawks past the San Francisco 49ers, and the Buffalo Bills handed the Kansas City Chiefs their first loss of the season. On Sunday night, the Los Angeles Chargers jumped on the Cincinnati Bengals early only to squander a 21-point lead before recovering for a win. Our NFL Nation reporters reacted to all the action, answering lingering questions coming out of each game and detailing everything else you need to know for every team. Let's get to it. Can the Texans build on this win? The Texans 7-4 got their biggest margin of victory this season by playing complimentary football Monday. The offense scored 27 points, fueled by Mixon's 3 touchdowns, and the defense scored a touchdown and sacked Cowboys quarterback Cooper Rush 5 times while intercepting him once. It wasn't completely clean, but a blowout win is something the Texans were desperate for. Describe the game in 2 words: key acquisition. Mixon continues to be the Texans' best offensive pickup from the offseason. He had his 6th 100-yard rushing performance of the season, and his 3 scores were the second most in a single game in his career. Early prediction for next week: quarterback C.J. Stroud throws for more than 300 yards against the Tennessee Titans. He's due for a big performance, as he has gone 6 weeks without surpassing 300 passing yards. Last season, he threw for more than 300 yards 6 times compared to only twice so far in 2024. Is Coach Mike McCarthy too aggressive with his decision-making? The Cowboys are a flawed team. They need a lot to go right for them to win games at the moment, so mismanagement stands out even more. Late in the third quarter, Mike McCarthy elected to go for it on 4th, and 2 instead of the near-automatic field goal for Brandon Aubrey that would have cut Houston's lead to 20-13. The 4th down try failed, and even if it worked, it would have been called back because of a holding penalty. On the Cowboys' first possession, McCarthy okayed a fake punt attempt from the Dallas 33. Brian Anger's pass to Wanya Thomas was complete, but was 5 yards short of a first down because John Mechie III read the fake perfectly. It was the second time in 3 games the Cowboys had a fake punt snuffed out by the opposition. Looking to jumpstart momentum, the decisions have backfired. Most surprising performance: Brandon Aubrey rarely misses field goal attempts. Before Monday, he had never missed at AT&T Stadium. With a 53-yarder in the second quarter, he extended his streak to 33 straight made field goals at home. But later in the quarter, his 40-yard attempt hit the right upright, keeping the Cowboys at a 7-point deficit, 17-10. Aubrey's plant leg slipped as the ball sliced just barely to hit the post. As automatic as Aubrey has been in his 2 seasons, the miss was emblematic as to how the season has gone for the Cowboys. Eye-popping stat: Cavani Turpin is the fastest Cowboy, and he showed Monday he's among the fastest players in the NFL. On his 64-yard touchdown catch in the second quarter, Turpin reached a max speed of 22.36 miles per hour. According to Next Gen Stats, that's the fastest max speed by a ball carrier since 2020 when running back Raheem Mostert topped that speed twice that season. Should the Chargers be concerned with how they won this game? While the Chargers escaped Sunday night with a victory to move them to 7-3 on the season, it was much more difficult than it needed to be and highlighted this team's second-half flaws. The Chargers needed 2 missed field goals from Cincinnati and a late rushing score from LA running back J.K. Dobbins to save them from an embarrassing loss. It showed that the Bolts can finish a game even amid a near meltdown, but this style of winning likely won't be sustainable for a team looking to make a deep postseason run. Describe the game in 2 words: meltdown averted. For much of the second half, this team looked like the Chargers of old in allowing explosive plays and featuring a stalled offense and an uncharacteristic turnover from Justin Herbert. But LA got defensive stops when it needed them and converted offensively to come out with a win in the type of game this franchise's fans are accustomed to losing. Most surprising performance: Ladd McConkey. The rookie wide receiver notched his best performance and served as Herbert's safety valve with the game on the line in the fourth quarter. He caught 6 passes for 123 yards and helped the Chargers end the contest. The rookie has emerged as Herbert's most trusted target. Are the Bengals' playoff hopes done? Most likely. Earlier in the season, Joe Burrow said 10 wins would be enough to get into the playoffs comfortably. Now, that's the maximum number of games Cincinnati, 4 to 7, can win in the regular season. And the Bengals still must face the AFC North leading Steelers twice in the final 6 games. With no margin for error, Cincinnati will need to do something special in order to avoid missing the postseason for the second straight year. Biggest hole in the game plan, the pass defense, especially on the last drive. Cincinnati did a good job responding after a bad first half at SoFi Stadium. But with the game on the line, the defense allowed 2 big plays through the air that set up the winning touchdown. Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert had 4 completions of 20 or more air yards on the night, per NFL Next Gen stats, including 2 scores. Describe the game in 2 words: prime time, heartbreak. What could have been the biggest comeback on the road in franchise history ended up being another 1-score loss that might define a failed Bengals season. Can this win turn the Seahawks season around? It was headed in the wrong direction, with 5 losses in 6 games and a tumultuous week in which leading tackler Tyrel Dodson was waived and center Connor Williams abruptly retired. It led some to question whether the vibes were off in Seattle's locker room. But this one has turning point potential, as the Seahawks finally got over the hump against a division rival that had beaten them 6 straight times. They won in dramatic fashion with embattled quarterback Geno Smith leading a game-winning drive. Describe the game in 2 words: Hero Geno. Smith went 7 of 8 for 54 yards on the winning drive and added 2 rushes for 29 yards, including the climactic 13-yard touchdown. Per ESPN research, it was Smith's 7th game-winning drive in the fourth quarter or overtime since the start of last season, which is tied for the most in the NFL in that span. Most surprising performance, the Seahawks' defense. The unit didn't have an answer for receiver Jawan Jennings, but it kept them in the game. The defense played better than it did in any of Seattle's previous 6 losses to the 49ers, who averaged over 30 points in those games. 3 of San Francisco's points in this one resulted from a careless interception from Smith in 49ers territory. How much damage does Sunday's loss do to the 49ers' playoff chances? A lot. With a 1-3 record in divisional games, the Niners' chances of winning the NFC West took another significant hit. Winning the division for a 3rd straight year is the cleanest path to the playoffs, but clearly nothing is going to come clean or easy this year. They now face a difficult 2-game road test at Green Bay and Buffalo near Thanksgiving. If they can't find a way to win at least one of those games, they'll face a home stretch in which they'd have to be nearly perfect to elbow their way back into the postseason picture. Most surprising performance, wide receiver Jawan Jennings. The 49ers' offense was sluggish and needed a spark. Jennings provided it. After falling behind late, Jennings converted an improbable 3rd, and 11 on his way to 10 receptions for 91 yards and a score, a gallant effort from one of the team's breakout stars. Describe the game in 2 words: no excuses. This is the 3rd time in 4 divisional games the 49ers have lost a fourth quarter lead. Yes, the Niners were missing in Nick Bosa, hip and oblique injuries, as well as tight and George Kittle, hamstring, but this was still a winnable game with 1 more first down on offense or stop on defense. San Francisco got neither. Does this win prove the Bills are the best team in the AFC? There's some competition still, but the Bills are certainly front and center in that conversation. This was a statement win against the sole undefeated team in the NFL and the defending Super Bowl champion. The Bills put up 30 points against a Kansas City defense that hadn't allowed more than 30 points since Week 4 of 2022, forcing quarterback Patrick Mahomes to throw 2 interceptions. This win keeps the Bills in the race for the number 1 seed. Describe the game in 2 words: MVP conversation. Allen made his case for being a frontrunner in the MVP race with his 26-yard touchdown run on 4th, and 2 that practically killed any chance the Chiefs had to win the game. He weaved his way past defenders to get to the end zone, notching the 2nd longest scrambled touchdown in his career. Most surprising performance, the Bills' rushing offense. Buffalo could not get anything going on the ground. The Bills rushed 13 times for 22 yards on first down, an average of 1.7 yards per play. The running backs finished with 49 yards on 19 carries, averaging 2.6 yards. They'll have to find ways to avoid becoming one-dimensional, especially in these back-and-forth games. How much damage did this loss do to the Chiefs' chances at the AFC's number one seed? Plenty, according to ESPN Analytics. The Chiefs were given a 91% chance of getting the number one seed had they beaten the Bills, but now their chances are down to 54%. They have to worry about finishing ahead of not only the two-loss Bills, who have a tiebreaker against them, but also the two-loss Steelers. The Chiefs and Steelers will meet Christmas Day in Pittsburgh. Most surprising performance, tight end Travis Kelce. He had been on a nice run of late, but the Bills held him to 2 catches for 8 yards. He has had big games against Buffalo in recent seasons, and there was no way the Bills were going to allow him another performance like the 5-catch, 75-yard, 2 touchdowns showing he had in the playoffs last season. Describe the game in 2 words: no nail-biter. The Chiefs are used to playing in games decided in the final minutes, even on the last play. They were looking to play in a game decided by a more comfortable margin, but this was not what they had in mind. Worse yet, they were outplayed by the Bills. Has quarterback Bo Nix put himself in the Rookie of the Year conversation? Nix has flourished since October began, including in the Broncos' sweep of the NFC South. He was 28 of 33 passing for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns Sunday. It was his first 4-touchdown effort and first 300-yard passing game in the NFL. He has 13 touchdown passes in the past 7 games and has topped 70% completions in 4 of those, including Sunday. He has thrown just 2 interceptions in the past 9 games, and the Broncos are 6-3 over that span. Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels was the easy pick a month ago, but Nix might be playing the best of all the rookie signal callers right now. Early prediction for next week: as the backfield will continue to spin for Coach Sean Payton, the Broncos will keep wide receiver Marvin Mims Jr. involved. Mims, who had 8 touches in the first 9 games, has appeared as a running back over the past 2 weeks. After 4 receptions and 3 carries last week, he had his first receiving touchdown of the season and 3 carries against the Falcons. Describe the game in 2 words: perfect tonic. Last week's loss in Arrowhead was a soul crusher, a potential game-winning field goal blocked on the last play. While Payton maintained all week that he thought his team had rebounded emotionally, the Broncos proved it with another high-level defensive performance and one of their most efficient offensive showings of the season. They scored a touchdown on their first possession for the first time since Week 3. How can the Falcons hold on to their status as favorites in the NFC South? 2 weeks ago, the Falcons were celebrating their best start, 6-3, since 2016. Now, Atlanta goes into its bye week on a 2-game losing streak with a struggling defense that's banged up in the secondary. Falcons coach Raheem Morris will need the week off to make changes to a unit that has come out flat time after time. The Buccaneers have an easy remaining slate, and the Saints are on a 2-game winning streak. Atlanta cannot rest on its laurels. Describe the game in 2 words: Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong for the Falcons did go wrong. They had critical penalties, a controversial overturned 4th down conversion for the Broncos, and they lost cornerback Kevin King to a concussion when the team was already down 3 defensive backs. It was by far Atlanta's most disastrous performance of the season. Eye-popping stat: the Falcons sent 4 or fewer pass rushers on all of Bo Nix's 21 first-half dropbacks. The passive strategy resulted in just 3 pressures, and the Broncos quarterback made Atlanta pay by going 17 of 19 for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns before halftime. The Falcons didn't dial up much pressure in the second half either. Can the Rams offense sustain this success as they attempt a playoff run? After the Rams didn't score a touchdown against Miami, Coach Sean McVay called the offense inconsistent. While the Rams scored 28 points against the Patriots, they did it all in the second and third quarters. The Rams did not turn the ball over for the first time since Week 3. They'll face a tougher test in Week 12 against a Philadelphia defense ranked 7th in DVOA. The Rams have won 3 out of 4 games after a 1-4 start and now have a playoff probability of 14%, according to NFL Next Gen stats. Eye-popping stat: Matthew Stafford's second quarter touchdown pass to wide receiver Puka Nacua had a completion probability of 13.5% per NFL Next Gen stats. That's Stafford's lowest completion probability on any passing touchdown since 2017, when NGS began tracking that stat. The play gave the Rams a lead they never relinquished. Biggest hole in the game plan: another slow start offensively. For the 7th time in 10 games, the Rams failed to score in the first quarter. They have been outscored by 50 points in first quarters this season, which is the worst in the NFL, according to ESPN research. When asked last week whether they could pinpoint the reason for the early scoring struggles, Both Stafford and McVay said it's the result of poor execution. Does first-year coach Jared Mayo need to be more aggressive with his play calling? Mayo has referred to himself as a defensive head coach, and some of his decision-making reflected that. He didn't attempt a 54-yard field goal, tough wind in that direction. He settled for a field goal on fourth and 3 from the Rams' 13 late in the second quarter, not going for it on 4th and goal from the 2 in the third quarter. And he called for a PAT instead of a 2-point conversion while trailing 28-19 early in the fourth quarter. It was blocked. Such decisions are always easy to second guess, but none worked out for the Patriots. Mayo has said he's taking notes throughout his first season and plans to learn from his experience. This game presented multiple decisions from which he can learn. Biggest hole in the game plan: aligning correctly along the offensive line. The Patriots led 7-0 and appeared to convert on third, and 8 on a 17-yard connection from quarterback Drake made it tight in Hunter Henry. But an illegal formation penalty called on left tackle Vidarian Lowe, which might have been a result of how deep left guard Michael Jordan aligned next to him, negated the play. It was a turning point in the game. Most surprising performance: pass coverage. It certainly didn't help that the Patriots couldn't generate a consistent rush, but the secondary, which is a strength of the defense, didn't have many answers for the potent combination of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Nacua had 6 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown in the first half. Kupp had 2 touchdowns, and the latter was a back-breaking 69-yarder early in the third quarter. Was this a bounce-back game for quarterback Sam Darnold? Absolutely. The game began inauspiciously when, on the third play of the Vikings' first possession, Darnold's pitch to running back Aaron Jones hit the ground and was recovered by the Titans. But after committing 6 turnovers in the previous 2 games, Darnold held onto the ball for the rest of the game while throwing 2 touchdown passes and running for a third. That was no small feat given the heavy pressure, 38% of offensive snaps he endured from the Titans' defensive front, which was active even after the Vikings gave right guard Dalton Reisner a strong pass blocker, his first start of the season. Describe the game in 2 words: penalty buffet. The Vikings had 2 touchdown drives extended by penalties against the Titans, including one on a 4th down incompletion. Penalties sometimes cancel out over the course of a game, but the Vikings held a big advantage throughout and ended up with 3 for 35 yards compared to the Titans' 13 for 91 yards. Most surprising performance: backup linebacker Pat Jones 2-pressured Titans quarterback Will Levis throughout the game, finishing with 2 sacks. They were his first sacks since week 4, but he already has a career-high 7.0 on the season. Can quarterback Will Levis' big plays boost him for the rest of the season? Levis showed glimpses of the deep passer he was last season. It started with a beautifully thrown pass from his own end zone to Nick Westbrook-Akine for a 98-yard touchdown. Levis' deep strike to Calvin Ridley for 51 yards on a post the next series was another well-placed pass, but an illegal formation penalty called it back. Those 2 passes seemed to do something for Levis. With 7 games left in the season, he can build upon his season-high 295 passing yards in his quest to prove he's Tennessee's future at QB. Describe the game in 2 words: uphill battle. The Titans knew they were going to be attacked by Brian Flores' defense. Minnesota did just that against the Titans' offensive line, resulting in 5 sacks. The Titans also didn't get the benefit of the whistle. The biggest penalty was called against safety Mike Brown for a personal foul after he broke up a pass on 4th down. Early prediction for next week: the Titans have allowed quarterbacks to rush for a touchdown in each of their past 2 games, and Darnold managed to escape multiple would-be sacks and deliver the ball downfield for big plays. Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud could rush for his first touchdown of the year next week. Is this what quarterback Jordan Love needed to get rolling? On a day when the Packers signal caller threw his 11th interception to match his season total from last year, he and the offense left Soldier Field knowing that if they need a game-winning drive, they can get one. Trailing 19-14, Love, who was effective all game when throwing deep, hit receiver Christian Watson for a 60-yard catch and run. That set up the go-ahead score with 2:59 left in the game. Describe the game in 2 words: lucky win. The Packers got away with a flat performance for the first 3.5 quarters and only their last drive, and Carl Brooks blocking a 46-yard field goal attempt on the final play of the game saved them from embarrassment. The Packers were fortunate not to lose any more ground in the NFC North. Biggest hole in the game plan: red zone decisions. The Packers threw the ball on 2nd and 1 from the Bears' 5-yard line and got flagged for an ineligible man downfield. 2 plays later, on 3rd and 11 from the 15, Love threw his 11th interception of the season. Later, coach Matt LaFleur went for it on 4th and goal instead of settling for a field goal that would have cut the Bears' lead to 19-17. How did the offensive coordinator change affect the Bears' offense? New OC Thomas Brown game plan led to more decisiveness from rookie quarterback Caleb Williams, who held the ball less, 2.42 seconds, the lowest of his career, and made short, quick throws to combat the Packers' pass rush. The Bears leaned heavily on the run, including a career-high 70 rushing yards from Williams, got their top playmakers involved, 17 total catches for wide receivers DJ Moore, Romo Duns, and Keenan Allen, and had more third down conversions, 8, than they did the previous 3 weeks combined, 6. Describe the game in 2 words: gut punch. Chicago was playing its best complementary football since before its recent 4-game losing streak. After cornerback Terrell Smith picked off Jordan Love in the red zone, the Bears ended their streak of 25 straight drives without a touchdown. But Cairo Santos had a 46-yard field goal blocked as time expired, which would have given Chicago its first win over Green Bay in 11 meetings. Biggest hole in the game plan. The Bears need to play better along the defensive line. They pressured Love on only 3 of his 17 dropbacks, 3 of 3, 72 passing yards, and running back Josh Jacobs went untouched into the end zone on Green Bay's lone third-quarter drive. With nose tackle Andrew Billings' pectoral out for the season, Chicago's D-line needs to find solutions for their porous run defense. Quickly, is the bye coming at the right time for the Saints? New Orleans is finally picking up some positive momentum with its first win streak since week 2, potentially putting the bye at an inopportune time. But it's been a long season for the Saints, who fired coach Dennis Allen after a 7-game losing streak and promoted Darren Rizzi to interim coach. The Saints have dealt with a laundry list of injuries, and this could be a good opportunity for players such as Eric McCoy and Pete Werner to heal injuries they have been playing through. They face the Rams and Giants after the bye. Describe the game in 2 words: Taysom time. The Saints got the full Taysom Hill experience against the Browns. He was a blocker, receiver, quarterback, and running back. He scored 3 times, but was also picked off throwing deep and fumbled near the end zone. Per ESPN research, Taysom Hill is the first player with 3 rushing touchdowns, 50 receiving yards, and 1 pass completion in a game since the Chiefs' Ed Podolak in 1971. Most surprising performance: W.R. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Valdez-Scantling joined the team only a month ago, but has already proved he can be the team's explosive element with Rashid Shaheed out for the season. Valdez-Scantling has now scored 3 touchdowns in 2 games, tying the team lead in receiving touchdowns. He had a 71-yard touchdown in the first half Sunday. Do the Browns have a wide receiver core they can build around? Jerry Jeudy had his best game of the season with a 142-yard performance, his first 100-plus yard game since 2022. Elijah Moore delivered an acrobatic touchdown catch, and wide receiver Cedric Tillman chipped in with 47 yards. All 3 players are 25 or younger and have stepped up since the trade of Amari Cooper, giving the Browns something to be bullish on as they inch closer to their 3rd losing season since Kevin Stefanski became head coach in 2020. Biggest hole in the game plan: not placing more attention on Taysom Hill. The Browns talked about how mindful they would have to be of Hill and his multifaceted role. But time and time again, they lost track of or couldn't bring down Hill, who recorded a career-high 8 catches, completed a pass, and ran into the end zone 3 times. Most surprising performance: kicker Dustin Hopkins missed a pair of field goals, including a 27-yard attempt as time expired in the first half. Another missed kick was negated by a holding penalty. It was just the 2nd time in Hopkins' 134-game career that he missed 2 field goal attempts in a game. Was this a bad game or a bad sign for Russell Wilson? Despite a stout defensive effort to force 3 turnovers and 2 rare misses from Ravens kicker Justin Tucker, the Steelers' offense managed only 9 points on the ensuing drives, and it nearly cost them in Sunday's 18-16 win. Wilson completed 1 of 8 attempts for -1 yards with an interception and 4 sacks when pressured. And in the red zone, he completed just 2 of 9 attempts for 7 yards and an interception. He papered over an inefficient performance a week ago against the Commanders with a rebound 4th quarter and a game-winning moonball to Mike Williams. But Wilson couldn't do the same against a statistically weaker Ravens defense. Biggest hole in the game plan: not getting more from the Steelers' wide receivers. Against the league's worst pass defense, receivers not named George Pickens struggled to get open. Pickens led all receivers with 8 catches on 12 targets for 89 yards, but the rest of the receivers combined for 2 catches on 4 targets for 3 yards. At halftime, The Steelers had just 52 net passing yards. Most surprising performance, Chris Boswell. With the offense struggling to convert in the red zone, Boswell came through with 6 field goals, including 3 of 50 or more yards. Sunday marked Boswell's 4th game with 4 or more field goals this season, matching his own franchise record set in 2017. How much does this loss put a dent in the Ravens' chances to win the AFC North? This is a major setback for the Ravens in their pursuit to become back-to-back AFC North champions. Baltimore's chances to win the division dropped to 37%, according to ESPN Analytics. It's difficult to believe the Ravens can overtake the Steelers when quarterback Lamar Jackson continues to struggle against them. The reigning NFL Most Valuable Player is now 1-4 against Pittsburgh after completing a season-worst 48.4% of his passes, 16 of 33, which doesn't include his desperation toss on a failed 2-point conversion. Describe the game in 2 words: uncharacteristic mistakes. The Ravens turned the ball over 3 times after not committing a turnover in their previous 3 games. The most glaring one was an interception in which Steelers linebacker Peyton Wilson wrestled the ball away from running back Justice Hill. That ended a streak of 161 passes without a pick for Jackson. 2 fumbles were converted into 2 field goals, which was the difference in the game. Most surprising performance, Justin Tucker. The NFL's most accurate kicker was full of surprises. Tucker missed field goals from 47 and 50 yards in the first quarter, which marked the first time since 2022 that he had failed to convert on back-to-back attempts. Did quarterback Anthony Richardson show progress in his return to the lineup? It was not perfect, but Richardson took a step in the right direction after 2 weeks on the bench. He was more rhythmic in his passing, more accurate with his throws, and more in command of the offense. His final numbers, 20 of 30 for 272 yards, 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions, were a mixed bag. But he didn't turn the ball over, which had plagued him earlier in the season. The other variable of note was Coach Shane Steichen's adjusted play calling. The offensive play selection seemed to mesh better with Richardson's skills, including a significant increase in design quarterback runs. Biggest hole in the game plan: the Colts repeatedly tried and failed to generate rushing success. The Colts could not come up with more creative run schemes to beat the Jets' defensive front. Running back Jonathan Taylor rushed for 31 yards on 7 carries in the first quarter, but he was limited to 26 yards on 17 attempts the rest of the way. Describe the game in 2 words: good enough. The Colts had lost 3 straight and go home to face the Red-Hot Lions next week. With their playoff hopes dimming and a long week of debate over their quarterback situation looming, the Colts managed to take advantage of a bad Jets team. Indianapolis still has an eye on the postseason. What happened to the Jets' once formidable defense? The Jets topped the 25-point mark for the first time this season, and what happens? Their defense, once their pride and joy, chokes it away in the final 2 minutes. Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson marched 70 yards on 6 plays for the winning touchdown. The Jets looked lost on the final drive. Ditto their final offensive possession, as quarterback Aaron Rodgers made poor decisions as time ran out. It was a brutal ending. Most surprising performance: for the first time in his career, running back Breece Hall scored a rushing touchdown and a receiving TD in the same game. That's a surprise, considering he has been such a productive receiver. The offense is a lot better when Hall is heavily involved. He produced 121 yards from scrimmage, including 2 explosive plays, 29 yards receiving TD and 18 yards running TD. Describe the game in 2 words: deja vu. The Raiders' seemingly season-long script, a slow start followed by a rapid descent, reared its head for the umpteenth time this season. The Raiders had actually outgained Miami in total yardage in the first half before a late Dolphins flurry. And then, after getting nothing to start the second half, the Dolphins scored to start their second half surge. Most surprising performance: tight end Brock Bowers going off with Michael Myers' return. With Mayer playing for the first time since week 3, targets to tight ends would seemingly be at a premium, right? No. Bowers continued his Pro Bowl level season with a career-high 13 catches for 124 yards. That was his first triple-digit receiving yards game, which included a 23-yard touchdown. Can the Lions keep overcoming injuries to key players? So far, yes. It's next man up in Detroit. Lions captain Alex Anzalone was ruled out with a forearm injury at the start of the second half, but Detroit still dominated in his absence, scoring 50-plus points in multiple games in a season for the first time in franchise history. The Lions also lost Defensive Player of the Year candidate Aiden Hutchinson to a leg injury earlier this season, but traded for Zadarius Smith last week, who recorded a sack in his Lions debut against Jacksonville. This Lions team has plenty of depth and has proved to be a resilient group. Describe the game in 2 words: home dominance. Surprisingly, the Lions scored their first opening drive touchdown at home this season with a goal line rush by David Montgomery. They never looked back. Detroit used a balanced attack to score a touchdown on 7 consecutive offensive drives. The Lions are also currently outscoring opponents plus 99, 188 to 89 at home this season, which is the most by any team in the NFL. Most surprising performance, Lions quarterback Jared Goff. Typically, Goff isn't viewed as a mobile quarterback. He's known for efficiency and pinpoint accuracy, but his mobility was on display against Jacksonville as he rushed for 21 yards off 4 carries. Goff hadn't rushed for 20 or more yards in a game since September 20th, 2021, at Green Bay, when he had 46. He also became the first quarterback in NFL history to have multiple games with a perfect passer rating, 158.3, and 400 passing yards. He also accomplished that feat in 2018 with the Rams. Was this coach Doug Peterson's last game with the Jaguars? If owner Shad Khan decides to fire Peterson and doesn't want to wait until after the season ends, this week would be the logical time to do it. The Jaguars are 2-9 after Sunday's embarrassing loss to the Lions and have lost 14 of their past 17 games, entering their bye week. Quarterbacks coach Mike McCoy was a coach with the San Diego Chargers from 2013 to 16, so he would be the logical choice as an interim for the remainder of the season. Describe the game in 2 words: different directions. The Jags and Lions appear to be on similar trajectories following the 2022 season when both teams went 9-8. Jacksonville has gone in the opposite direction after an 8-3 start in 2023, and there are major holes to fill along the offensive line, at cornerback, linebacker, and receiver, as well as adding another pass rusher. The talent gap between the 2 franchises was evident. Eye-popping stat: the Jaguars gave up 644 yards to the Lions, the second most in a single game in their 30-year franchise history, trailing only the 653 yards they allowed to Houston in 2012. Quarterback Jared Goff's 412 passing yards is tied for the 5th most allowed in a game in franchise history. What is the Eagles' ceiling at this point? It's time to start viewing them as title contenders. Their past 5 wins were over teams with sub-.500 records, but they took down a quality Washington team on Thursday to extend their lead in the NFC East to 1.5 games. The Eagles have positioned themselves to challenge the Lions for the top seed in the conference. There are tests remaining on the schedule, including tilts with the Ravens and Steelers, but the bulk of their travel is over. Next week's trip to play in Los Angeles against the Rams will be the Eagles' last plane ride of the regular season. Philadelphia heads into the final stretch red hot and largely healthy. Eye-popping stat: rookie cornerback Quinyon Mitchell allowed 0 receptions on 1 target in 32 coverage snaps as the nearest defender in coverage, per NFL Next Gen stats. Mitchell, who is often pitted against Terry McLaurin, Washington's top receiver, is allowing 0.9 yards per coverage snap this season, the 6th best of 44 cornerbacks, with at least 200 coverage snaps in 2024. Most surprising performance: the normally reliable Jake Elliott had a subpar night, missing field goal attempts from 44 and 51 yards in the first half. He followed up with a missed extra point early in the 4th quarter after the Eagles went ahead. Elliott entered the game tied for the 2nd highest field goal percentage, 90.9%, since 2021 among NFL kickers with 80-plus attempts, but has now missed 5 field goals this season. What has gone wrong with the offense? Coach Dan Quinn and quarterback Jaden Daniels insist the rookie signal caller is fine physically after hurting his ribs in Week 7, but the passing game has been inconsistent the past 3 games. Washington has played 2 of the league's best defenses in the past 2 games in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and the Commanders might not have enough playmakers to challenge top units. The Steelers and Eagles generated more pressure on Daniels, perhaps speeding him up and forcing him to be less accurate than he was earlier in the season. They've also done a good job taking away his running ability, as Daniels has rushed for 18 combined yards in the past 2 games. Biggest hole in the game plan: the inability to get the wide receivers involved, notably Terry McLaurin. McLaurin was not targeted until the 3rd quarter, only the 2nd time in his 6-year career that he did not have a first-half target, and finished with only 1 catch for 10 yards. The receivers combined for 4 catches and 28 yards overall. Without their involvement, the offense isn't explosive. Describe the game in 2 words: Not yet. The Commanders played tough for 3 quarters for the second consecutive game, but surrendered a 4-point lead to the Eagles in the fourth quarter on Thursday after squandering a 10-point lead to the Steelers in the final period on Sunday. Washington's next evolutionary step is learning to close out games versus good teams.